Lizzie and Charles want to keep the puppy their firefighter father brought home from a fire scene. It's not going great so far. I'm Miss Melissa at the Oosterhout Free Library. We're reading Goldie from the Puppy Place series, written by Ellen Miles and published by Scholastic. They're with their friend, Sammy. It was only a little puddle, Sammy said. I don't know why your mom got so upset. He kicked a stone between the two big maple trees at the end of the Dodsons' driveway. Goal! Charles, Lizzie, and Sammy were walking to school together, the way they always did. Charles and Sammy were both in Mr. Mason's second grade class. Lizzie was in fourth. It had not been easy to say goodbye to Goldie. Charles could still practically see her big eyes watching him curiously as he helped Lizzie clean up the puppy's mistake. Would she still be there when he got home from school? We have to convince Mom to let us be her foster family, he thought. His fists were all balled up inside his jacket pockets. He almost felt like he might cry. He took a deep breath. We have to make a plan, he said. First, we convince Mom to let us foster Goldie. Then we convince her to let us keep her forever and ever. Lizzie grinned at him. I'm with you, she said. Sammy bumped fists with Charles. Me too. Charles had a hard time paying attention in school that day, and it wasn't because he was making up new knock-knock jokes. It was because he could not stop thinking about Goldie. What was she doing? Was she still feeling scared? Was Mom making sure that she had enough clean, fresh water? Was she making sure that the bean was not bothering Goldie? Mr. Mason called on Charles 3 times during math, even though Charles did not raise his hand. Subtraction was not usually hard for Charles, but today it was. First, Mr. Mason wanted to know how many cherries Anna would have left if she started with 13 and gave Charles 8. 7? Charles guessed. He knew it was wrong as soon as he said it. Mr. Mason just shook his head and moved on. Later, he tried Charles again. What if I had 11 elephants, he asked, and I gave you 3? Charles pictured 3 huge elephants squeezed trunk to tail in his living room. Then he pictured a tiny but ferocious Goldie running around their huge feet, barking at them. He smiled. Charles, Mr. Mason was waiting. 7? Said Charles. Again, he knew it was wrong. The 3rd time, Charles didn't even hear Mr. Mason call on him. Sammy finally poked Charles in the side. Wake up, said Sammy. Charles didn't even know what the question was. 7? He guessed. Correct, said Mr. Mason with a big smile. Now you're getting it. The only time Charles really paid attention was during reading partners' time, when his class went down the hall to read with their kindergarten friends. Charles had a partner named Oliver, a funny little boy who wore big glasses. Oliver always wanted to read about dogs. That day, he showed Charles a book called Why Do Dogs Bark? It was full of interesting facts about dogs. Charles was happy to read that book to Oliver. It made him think of Goldie. Finally, school was over. It was time to go home and see Goldie again. Charles could have run the whole way home, but Lizzie and Sammy were walking along slowly, talking about how to convince Mom to let them keep Goldie. I spent my whole turn on the computer looking up how to housebreak puppies, Lizzie reported. 4th graders got a half hour of computer time every day. She showed them a bunch of articles she had printed out. Goldie's so smart, she'll learn to go to the bathroom outside in no time. I had this great idea, Sammy said. We just need a tiny little tape recorder that you can hide under your parents' bed. Charles stared at his friend. What? Sammy was always coming up with the wildest ideas. It's easy, said Sammy. We just make this tape that says, you want a dog, you love dogs, you love Goldie, you want to keep her. He was talking like a robot. Then we leave it under your mom's bed so it plays at night while she's sleeping, he explained in his normal voice. So she gets kind of, hypnotized. Lizzie laughed. You want to hypnotize my mom? Right, said Sammy. Believe me, it'll work. I saw this guy at the fair last year. He convinced a lady that she was a chicken. She was squawking and flapping her wings and... Charles had tuned out. He was thinking about Goldie again. He could hardly wait to pick her up and hold her in his arms. Sammy went home to check on Rufus, his dog, and Charles and Lizzie went up their walk. Mom opened the door when she heard them on the front steps. She looked very tired. Her hair was all straggly. The bean was on the floor by her right foot. Goldie was by her left foot. "Oof!" barked Goldie. She looked happy to see Charles and Lizzie. "Oof!" barked the bean. He looked happy too. Mom was holding something in her hand. It was one of her running shoes, or at least something that used to be a shoe. "Mom," said Lizzie, holding up her articles, "I bet I can housebreak Goldie in 1 week." "And I'll make a bed for Goldie in my room," Charles said, "so I can watch her at night and—" Mom held up her hand, the one that wasn't clutching the chewed-up sneaker. "Don't even bother trying to convince me," she said. "I've already made up my mind." "But, Mom," Charles said. "I knew it," Lizzie wailed. "I just knew you wouldn't let us keep her." Mom looked at Charles, to Lizzie, and back to Charles again. "Don't you want to wait and hear what I decided before you get all upset?" she asked. "Come on, let's go have a snack and talk about it." She led them to the kitchen. Goldie trotted ahead of her, slipping and sliding a little on the wood floor. The bean ran along on his short little legs, shouting, "Dodie! Dodie!" "Dodie?" Lizzie asked. This was a new word for the bean. "It's how he says Goldie," her mom explained, as she put a bowl of grapes and a plate of chocolate chip cookies on the table. "He's crazy about that dog. All he wanted to do all day was follow her around and do everything she did. He even tried to drink from her water bowl." Charles looked down at the bean and shook his head. Who else had a little brother who thought he was a dog? "So we're not keeping Goldie?" he asked. "Well, we aren't keeping Goldie for good," said his mom, smiling. "But she's sweet to the bean, so she can stay for a little while, just until we find her a really good home." Their mom patted Goldie on the head. "She deserves the best." "Mom!" Lizzie threw her arms around her mother. Charles couldn't believe his ears. "Really? Really? Goldie's staying with us?" "Only for a little while," his mom answered. "Don't forget that part." She looked down at the bean. He was tugging at one of her shoelaces while Goldie tugged at the other. "It's great for the bean to have such a good friend, but this family is not ready to have a full-time dog. Not yet." Charles nodded. "Right," he said. He was sure he could convince his mom to keep Goldie forever. He slid down off his chair and sat on the floor next to Goldie. She trotted right over, climbed up into his lap, and started chewing on his ear. It tickled. Charles laughed and kissed the top of the puppy's silky head. Goldie liked that. This boy made her feel happy and safe. She was so glad to see him again. It seemed like forever since he had gone away. Goldie wagged her little tail as hard as she could as she nibbled and licked and nuzzled. By now, Lizzie had joined Charles on the floor. "Let me hold her for a minute," she said. "Here, Goldie." Happily, Goldie climbed over to explore Lizzie's ears. The girl was also wonderful, and she smelled good and tasted even better. Then the bean started to nibble on Charles's ears. "Hey," said Charles, "Mom, tell him he's not a dog." "I've been trying to tell him that all day," his mom said, laughing. Then she sat down at the table and got serious. "So, here's the deal," she said. "You two are going to be responsible for this puppy whenever you are home. That means you walk her, you feed her, you make sure she has water. And don't forget our goal. We need to make sure Goldie goes to the best possible home." She looked at Charles, then at Lizzie. "If you do a really good job fostering Goldie, I might start to believe that this family will be ready for a puppy of our own sometime soon." Charles and Lizzie were nodding eagerly. "Okay, Mom," said Charles. "We'll start training her right away," promised Lizzie. "It will be easier to find a good home for a puppy that behaves." "Oh, and one more thing," Mom added. "You also have to take care of all your regular chores. I don't want your rooms to become disaster areas just because we have a puppy in the house." She looked at Charles when she said this. Lizzie was tidy, but Charles's room was usually a mess. No falling behind on schoolwork. This time she looked at Lizzie, who sometimes waited to do her homework until the last minute. "No problem," said Charles, even though he hated cleaning his room. "Absolutely, Mom," promised Lizzie. She held Goldie up and rubbed noses with the pup. "We'll do anything to keep you around, right, sweetie?" Goldie stuck out her tongue and licked Lizzie's nose. Then she clambered down and started to sniff the floor. We'll find out what happens next on this coming Wednesday from the Oosterhout Free Library, where we have lots of books with interesting facts about dogs. And if you notice, I was reading from my phone today. That's because you can also get this book on our free cloud library app, as well as our shelves. See you next time.